All right. I'm going to start more of a teaching series. A lot of times, I do series, and we're like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and we're out. And I want to do, this is something I've wanted to do for quite a while. And in your notes there, you see it says naked fruit. I know, I said naked in the sanctuary. I promise you, I will never show up that way, okay? So you don't have to worry about that. But sometimes we have things that are deep theological platforms in our faith, and because they're not as talked about or whatever in Scripture, they almost get slighted. When we think of the fruits of the Spirit, we almost think of something that's kids. I can remember the very first VBS I ever went to. I can't even tell you how old I was, probably 5. Okay, I mean, this is a long time ago. We had to ride horses. No, I'm kidding, it wasn't that bad. But, it was a long time ago. And it was at a neighbor's church, and they took me and everything. And I know I had to probably be 5 or 6 because we were in the youngest group that was there. And we had to learn the passage out of Galatians that talked about the fruits of the Spirit. And here's what I remember. There's 2 things about this whole VBS that I remember the most. One, this is in the 70s. So let me just tell you that right there. And my teacher, now I was only 5, but she was cute. And I can remember asking her, and now part of the reason why I remember asking her is because this was reinforced at the Friday night parent night thing. We'd gone through the lesson, all this kind of stuff, and she says, "Does anybody have any questions?" And I raised my hand, and I said, "Are you wearing hot pants?" Now, she asked if anybody had any questions. I did. That was my question, okay? But I also remember that at that final night, we'd all made these neat little things out of burlap. And I remember I started we went down the line, and I had to turn around in front of everybody and say, "And the fruit of the Spirit is love." And then the next person said the next one, and we went right down the line, okay? And there it was. And that's what I remember about the fruits of the Spirit, okay? And a lot of times, like I said, there are these things because, we want things to be deep and intellectual and, so we can say God and things like that, okay? It makes it more spiritual sounding. So when you start talking about the fruits of the Spirit, it's kind of like, oh, well, that was nice. And yet, the reality is these are the changes that should be taking place in our life. This isn't just something that is a nice little Sunday school lesson. This is the transformation that should be taking place as a result of the resurrection. Okay? This isn't something that, well, by the way, this just is a neat little thing, and I'll throw, Paul wasn't like sitting in a fruit market and came up with this idea, okay? There's something that, that came out of this that he was beginning to understand because he was seeing the changes that were taking place in his life. So we're going to start this today. I can't tell you how many weeks we're going to go because it's one of those, okay? Because I think some of these, as I'm finishing up and really working through my outlines, some of these things are going to have a lot more detail to them. Others are kind of, it's going to be what it is. But we're going to be looking at this. It starts in Galatians chapter 5. And we're going to be looking at, this is kind of that intro message to the whole thing here. And first of all, I want us to look at a couple of things here. First of all, there's 2 misconceptions when we talk about the fruits of the Spirit. Okay, there's 2 misconceptions. The first one is this: the fruit of the Spirit is not about making us nice people. See, we think that because we have words like love, joy, peace. But then there's that word long-suffering. That doesn't sound very nice, especially when you're the one doing the long-suffering. Okay? Gentleness. And they just have images of like butterflies and bunnies and, And a lot of times we think the fruits of the Spirit, it makes us nice people. You want to know what? There's a lot of nice people in our world. And they're going to hell. And the reason they're going to hell is because they don't know Jesus. They're really nice people. There's a lot of nice people that sit in the pews of churches Sunday after Sunday after Sunday, and they're going to hell because they don't have a relationship with Christ. The fruits of the Spirit isn't something that just happens It's a process, and we're going to look at that here in a second. But it's more than just making us nice people. The second thing is, it's not up to us to produce the fruit. See, one of the misconceptions I think that we have as believers a lot of times is we think, you know what, if I can just get this area of my life under control, then everything else will be okay. You know, that one constant sin area, that problem that I have, that struggle that I have, if I can just get that under control, then everything will be okay. See, we're trying to produce something that it's not, we don't have the power, energy, strength, or the resource to produce. It does not exist within us.
That's right.
Do we understand this? So the fruits of the Spirit is not about making us nice people, and it's not up to us to produce the fruit. So let's look at this here a little bit here this morning. What is spiritual fruit? What is spiritual fruit? Let me ask you a question. What did Eve and Adam eat in the garden? How many of you think it was an apple? Oh, see, now you're going to, uh-oh. All right, now I already saw some of you on apple. You know, it was an apple. You know what? I actually heard somebody teach on this, and they're convinced it was a kiwi fruit. Now, my question is did they eat the fuzz on the outside or not? Because, see, that was enough for me to say, I'm not eating that stuff. I'm not a kiwi fan, all right? So, and then, now, Dave's been posting things like on our Twitter and all this kind of, I'm assuming it's you. If not, somebody's hijacked. I'm fine with what they're putting up. But and every once in a while, I'm like, where'd that one go? Oh, that's kind of funny. I like that. You know, it's great. But on our little Twitter account, it shows up on Facebook and all these kinds of things. But, you know, there's intelligence and there's wisdom. Wisdom tells us that a tomato is not a vegetable. It's a fruit. But intelligence also tells us you don't put that tomato in a fruit salad. Okay? You know, and now we can have arguments about the, you know, so what is spiritual fruit? Okay? It's not bananas and apples and pears and all these other fun things. Okay? So let's look at this here. First of all, and I'm not going to really read the passage right now because you have it at your disposal there in Galatians chapter 5. But first of all, fruit is a result of growth. Fruit is a result of growth. How many of you plant a garden? How many of you have ever planted a flower? How many of you have never put anything in the dirt besides a dead animal? All right, all of us have planted something at some point in time in our life. You know, anyway. It has to grow. All right, I always liked, when I was a kid, I liked watching The Addams Family. And I remember one time where Morticia was given a dozen roses. Somebody had delivered a dozen roses. She goes, oh, look at these. She goes, well, these need a little help. She puts them in the vase, and she brings out these big pruners and went, whoosh, cut all the tops off of them. There we go. Much better. Okay, if you sent somebody a dozen stems, they would think there's something seriously wrong with you mentally, okay? I mean, it's the beauty of those flowers, okay? The fruit of the Spirit, it's a result of growth. Now, I'm not going to go back and redo a message I did several weeks ago, but if you remember, in John chapter 15, Jesus talked about, I am the vine, and you are the branches, okay? And what is the role of the branch? Abide in me, but we're also supposed to produce fruit. Okay, now, instantly we always think, oh, he was talking about we're all a bunch of grapevines. And we're supposed to make clusters of grapes. Okay, whatever. Remember that tomato, all right? It grows on a vine too, so we may just be nothing more than a bunch of tomatoes here today. But the job is to produce fruit, but it comes from growth. We don't take the seed, put it in the ground, and all of a sudden the fruit just starts growing on the ground. Okay? Doesn't matter what it is, what your fruit crop is. If it's something that comes from a tree, the tree has to grow. It has to mature. Has to get to a certain point where it can actually grow. Now, when I was a kid, we had a tree in our front yard. of our house. We lived down in the Cincinnati area, and we had this tree, and it was an ugly tree. It was a stupid tree, and my dad always, one of these days I'm going to cut it down, the classic one of these days. And one of these days, lightning struck the tree. The next year, it had apples on it. And I'm not exaggerating. This was an apple tree that had never really been pruned right. It just kind of grew all over the place, but for some reason, it had never produced fruit, at least not in the time frame we had lived there. It got hit by lightning. Part of the tree literally fell off. Okay, the lightning ripped this branch right, and the next year it had apples on it. It's kind of weird. Now, if God worked that way with us, what kind of fruit would we be producing? If you don't do something different, Because sometimes we think that's how God is anyway. We just think he's sitting up there going, goofed up again. Ooh. And Jesus is going, don't do it! And he's going, but that's not how God is. But we think that sometimes. That's why Jesus is constantly interceding, because we're constantly goofing it up. And it's his job to keep God from just going, there, that one's done. We think that sometimes. But fruit is a result of growth. In other words, it takes us remaining, abiding, being part of that relationship that Christ has always called us to. The whole reason he came to this earth, the whole reason he taught what he did, and I think it's amazing, his 3.5 years of teaching has turned into billions of books. How many of these things is that really what he was teaching or not? I don't know. I had somebody send me something on Facebook. Oh, Pastor. Well, it wasn't really Pastor, but hey, Don, you really need to read this article. This is amazing. And I'm going through it, and I realized who the article was from, and I sent it back, and I said, do you realize that the man who wrote this article left his wife and his 3 kids to pursue a bigger and better ministry? How does this still make him credible? And the response back, you're kidding. No. Do a little research on him. See? But God's called me to this. No, God called you to be a husband and be a father long before he called you to do anything else. And see, this man just didn't move from one place. He literally left the country his family was at and moved to the States. And he's building this huge ministry. And I look at this and I said, wait a minute. You got a wife and kids sitting back where you're from, that you left, and you've so spiritualized it, you've rationalized it. See, that's not growth. That's deception. Let's keep going here. Fruit is a result of a direct relationship with God. Again, we go back to that vine. You can't be cut off from the vine and keep producing fruit. You can't. It doesn't work that way. That branch cannot keep producing anything. As a matter of fact, it's going to die. And the leaves that are on it are going to dry up, they're going to fall off, and eventually you're going to burn that remnant that's there. That's how it works. If we were to cut off our arm today and leave it, just leave it lay there for 2-3 days, it's not going to do us any good. Even Dr. House from TV could not make it work again. Okay? You've cut it off. You've severed the life from it. All right? Fruit is a direct result of a relationship with God. It's our relationship with him that enables these things to be produced in our life. I really do. I really wish at the point of salvation, everything was taken care of. It'd be so much easier. We come, we accept Christ, we ask him, forgive me of my sins, and he goes, okay. And he just opens up our head, and he has this big bucket of all the things that we need spiritually, and he just dumps it into us, closes it back up, and says, there you go, you're all good. Good to go. It'd be so much easier. Then again, so is my execution theology. That would get people saved, shoot them right there on the spot, and you don't have to worry about them backsliding. And when working with teenagers, you will believe in that theology. Trust me. But you can't separate it. The other thing we can't do is we cannot compartmentalize our relationship with God. We can't say, well, it's Sunday morning. Woo-hoo! Praise you, Jesus. And then Monday at work, Jesus becomes a adjective or a pronoun, and actually who he is and what he supposedly did in your life on Sunday, woo-hoo, doesn't exist again. It only happens when we put on our hat and tie. You know what I'm saying? And yet, how many times do we spend more time and energy putting him, hey, Jesus, you were great this morning. I'll be back Sunday. Oh, we got a Bible study on Wednesday. I'll bring you with me that too. But we'll put you back. There has to be a constant, direct relationship. Okay? So look at the third thing here. Growing spiritual fruit is a process. It is a process. Matter of fact, Paul was writing and he says, you know, I really wish I could give you some meat. I really do. But you're refusing to grow. And so you're still stuck on the milk. You're still stuck on the basics. You're still haggling over dumb stuff. Things that aren't that important. And you're making them the mountains that you are going to die on. And they mean nothing. I worked for a pastor. That was his line. I'm not going to die on that hill. Well, you need to pick one. Okay? We need to find a mountain or two that we are willing to die on. Because if we're not, you know, it's that whole thing. If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And even in our faith. You know, it was when I was a youth pastor, you know, I had, you know, this is back in the 90s, and everybody and their brother was selling Christian t-shirts. You know, we were ripping off every trademarked logo and everything else and spiritualizing it, you know, and Jesus, he's the real thing, you know, and looked like the Coca-Cola logo and all these kinds of things, you know. And, oh, man, I had people in my church say, I'd sell you, how many shirts you want? I'll sell you as many as you want, because we were making a killing on them in the youth group and all this stuff, and everybody's buying these shirts. And where did they wear them? At all the church stuff. At all the religious events. Because it was safe. See, growing spiritual fruit is a process. You know, when we get saved, we are spiritual babies. Because it doesn't matter how much head knowledge you know, something is happening in this heart. Something is changing inside. This isn't the same old, same old. Your life should be radically altered. But what does that mean? It's a process. I think there's a reason why love is the first fruit. Because for the first time in our life, we'll actually experience what real love is. When we've accepted Christ into our life, we understand the absolute sacrifice as much as we can in our minds. It's hard to understand this. It's hard to fathom this whole thing. And I think the only way we can really wrap our heads around the concept of that love is, you know, is when we become parents, quite honestly. Because I can tell you, when Corey was born, my outlook on things changed radically. I drove different. Okay? I did. I drove different. I didn't yell as much at other drivers as I would. No, I mean, I did. I totally drove different. Things that were important to me, weren't as important as the things that are now. I have a child to take care of. I have a child to raise. And it's been that way with each one. When Alexia was born, there was a commercial that was running, and I think it was for a bank or something, credit card company. It was a money thing, I know that. And the guy was, and his baby, and the baby starts talking to him and talks about, and it goes on and then it starts talking about, going to prom and this, and it ends with, and ice sculptures, and the man's envisioning the wedding that he's going to have to pay for. And it was like, and there it is. I mean, it's a newborn little girl now, and his brain's just running, 20 years down the road, all of these things. But we think differently. And it is a process. It would be awesome if we accepted Christ, and again, every sin, every bad attitude, every bad thought, action, all of those things just, boom, we're gone. It'd be awesome. But it's not. That's not how it was designed. When Jesus came back from the dead, guess what? He still had the holes. He still bore on his body the remains, the scars, the wounds, basically. I mean, 3 days. I mean, he didn't have, 3 days is not time to make a scar. Have you ever thought about that? Now, I know we hear about Thomas. I won't believe until I touch. Thomas put his hand in his side. Can you imagine what his back looked like? See, that stuff didn't go away. When we see Jesus in heaven, I think we're still going to see all these things. We're going to see the scars from the crown of thorns. We're going to see the holes in his hands and his feet. We're going to see his side. We're going to see his back that was ripped open for our healing. Even his death, there was a process to it. History tells us that most men never got past the beating. Physically, their body would go into shock and they would die from the beating long before they ever got to the actual cross. And again, it would be so nice. I had somebody describe what salvation is, and really, it's our life was going a certain direction, okay, and we were going this way, and honestly, the entire time we were leaving a mess behind us. But salvation is that point where we begin to realize this is wrong, and we turn around. We accept the forgiveness, and we start going the other direction, the way God wanted us to go. Now, sometimes there's a mess we got to clean up. We got to walk back through some of the really stupid decisions that we've made in life. They don't go away. I've told teenagers for years, you are making decisions today that can and will affect you for the rest of your life. You are. There's a guy this week, I saw the story. He's up on a murder trial. He's very concerned that he's going to get a fair trial. The reason is because across his neck is the word, it's tattooed, murderer. He's concerned he's not going to get a fair trial. My suggestion is buy a turtleneck. All right? But he's worried about that. Well, I would be too. I would be too. All right? And I'm not dogging tattoos, or I'm just, But think about that. We make a lot of decisions. I saw a lady this morning. She made a decision. Fortunately, I saw her making her decision, or we wouldn't have made it here today. Because all of us had to stop, but she just didn't feel the need. And she went right on through the stop sign. Like this. I know she saw it, because she kind of slowed down. But then she decided to go on anyway. I stopped. The fruits of the Spirit, it is a process. It is a continuing working out our faith. I don't think there's ever going to be a time where, we like our checklist, we like our shopping list, our laundry list, whatever. Oh, good, I got love today. Woohoo! Let's see, joy. I'm feeling pretty good, so I'm just going to check that one off too. So I got love and I got joy. Yeehaw! We're going to skip that long suffering because I just don't like that one. That one's a little, gentleness, goodness, faith. Oh, I got lots of faith. What about that long suffering? Hey, you just be quiet. This is my list. See what I'm saying? So it is a process. Let's look at this one here. The fruit of the Spirit is about being like Jesus. This is what's incredible. Jesus demonstrated all the fruits of the Spirit all the time. All the time. He demonstrated love, kindness, gentleness, goodness when he was dealing with the prostitute who they brought to him. We caught this woman in adultery. That's okay. Go and sin no more. He demonstrated gentleness when he cleaned out the temple. Think about that one. You know, we can look at this and we think Jesus was in a rage. Could you imagine what he would have done if he was really upset? Peace. Peace. As he's asleep in the back of the boat, as a storm is raging that even seasoned fishermen are scared for their life. He's asleep. The whole list. See, the whole point of the fruits of the Spirit is for us to become more like Him. That's the point. It is a process. I don't think any of us are ever really going to achieve it. Okay? Because let's just face it. Remember, we're sheep. And we're kind of stupid. And we do dumb things. But that's why there's always forgiveness. That's why there's grace. But it's a process that we have to pursue. One of the things that God's been showing me lately in my own prayer times, which, by the way, Wednesday nights, 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock, love to have you come and join us. You don't have to stay for the whole 3 hours. God, help me to know how to pray. And one of the things that I really feel He's been laying on my heart is I want you to be praying about how to become the person I want you to be. That's kind of a hard thing to hear. Because you go, you mean I'm not? Maybe that's the problem. It's a constant thing. It's an all the time thing. It's God. Lord, I want more of you. Well, I don't want just more of Him. I want to become more like Him. Because that's what He's asked me to do. That's what He's really called me to be. We hear about David, a man after God's own heart. And yet, we know what David did. Grabbed a lady, had her brought to the palace, sleeps with her. She gets pregnant. He has her husband killed, so to try to cover. And yet, he's known as a man after God's own heart. It's a process. But it's a process that we go through together. It's a process that as we stay, not only as individuals connected to the vine, but even as a congregation, as friends, as people who are here together, we are constantly encouraging each other. We're constantly building each other up. That's the point of church. Amen. Okay, that's really the point of church. Okay, it's not, if it was, well, this is what I'm supposed to do, we'd have a time clock out there. And we would come in on Sunday mornings and we'd punch our time clock. So, see, I was here. And then we leave, we'd punch out again. And instead of giving you a giving statement, we'd give you a time statement so you knew how many. So it's not about that. But it's about encouraging each other. It's about building each other up. It's about praying for each other. It's about helping each other as we're all growing to be more like Christ. Getting honest about the fruits of the Spirit. I want you this week, I'm going to give you a homework assignment as we wrap up here. And I want you to go home and I want you to just keep reading Galatians chapter 5. Galatians chapter 5. Next week, we're going to look at some things that the fruit of the Spirit is not. Now, I know some of us, we're going to look at that because there's a passage that tells us all the things that not having the fruits of the Spirit in our life, we're going, oh, well, that's not me. I'm not any of those things. Well, then yes, you are. Sorry. It's one of those passages that it's all inclusive. We all fit in there somehow, some way. Okay? Because sometimes in order to know what it is we're pursuing, we got to know what we're not pursuing. Amen? Amen. So stand with me this morning. getting honest about the fruits of the Spirit, becoming more like Jesus. That's what I want. That's the desire of my heart. I want to be more like him. I want, not